EncoreBostonNetwork.org. You can check out other events. You can sign up for our monthly newsletter. You can join us. And I love saying this, everything is free. And that is the biggest bargain of the century. This event is being recorded. We will send an email to all people who attended and registered with a link afterwards, probably in a number of days. And we'll also include any resources that came up during the event. So if you have any resources that are related you'd like us to share, let us know, please. And feel free to turn on the closed captioning if you find that helpful. Throughout the program, we encourage you to add comments, react, and submit questions. If you write the word question before your question, it'll be easier for us to find. So please feel free to do that. And I'd like to introduce our program today. Our topic today is Win at Networking for Your Next Job. And we're devoting an entire session on networking because depending on your field, 70 to 95% of jobs are filled through networking. Let me say that again, 70 to 95% of jobs. So if you do it well, you enhance your chances of success in your field. So we would like you today to help you gain a new perspective and learn strategies that you may never have thought of to help you successfully network. And our goals are to help you approach networking with a new perspective, new energy, try these new strategies. And if you have any questions or concerns about networking, this is your day to get those resolved. So we'll have time at the end for your Q&A. Our expert today is Paul Adler. He's the founder and principal of Global Business Consulting. He has learned tips, tricks, and strategies in networking that have enabled him to become a superior networker for success. And he's gained access to key influencers and decision makers. And he will be in conversation with Amy Avergun, who's a familiar face to many of you regulars in our programs. Amy is a seasoned workshop presenter. She's worked with both profit and nonprofit organizations. She began her career as a career coach, and she's dedicated to helping people play to their strengths and fulfill their purpose. So I now turn the program over to Amy.
All right. Well, thank you, Miriam. Welcome, everybody. As Miriam said, I've done several workshops for Encore Boston and other organizations. And one of them that I did included some tips on networking. And Paul happened to be an attendee who I ended up in a breakout room with. And I realized very quickly that Paul knew so much more about networking than I ever did. So I did a little networking of my own, and I reached out to him and I asked him if he would be willing to share what I think is kind of a unique approach to networking. And luckily for all of us, he agreed to do that. So before we even get into, sort of tapping into the bounty of knowledge that Paul has, I did want to do just a really quick poll to kind of see where everybody is in terms of networking. And this is, not very scientific, but I'll invite you to use the chat. And basically, on a scale from 1 to 10, when I say the word networking, are you filled kind of with dread and feel like, I hope I don't ever have to do this again? All the way to 10, which is networking is my superpower and I really can't wait to do it. So if you just kind of fill in from a scale 1 to 10, where are you on that? Just throw that into the chat. We'd love to see it. Okay. All right. So Angela's an 8 and Ellie's an 8. So we have some really good networkers here. This is wonderful. All right. Excellent. Excellent. We have a few that are, in the 2-ish category. Everybody can kind of see where we are. So it runs the gamut. We don't have any 10s. We have I think our highest was Kendra's an 8 or a 9. All right, I was just going to say. So my goal today is to help everybody through, basically asking Paul a lot of his questions, try and get everybody to bump up about 2 points. And I just want to say that after talking to Paul a couple of times on the phone, I was just inspired to sort of see if I could move myself up 2 points on the networking scale, because like a lot of you, not my favorite thing. So here's what I did to try and reframe networking in a way that kind of works better for me. And I don't know if this is going to, if people are going to relate to this or not. But I actually had my revelation in the women's shoe department of Nordstrom's. So I won't ask everybody to let me know how much you like Nordstrom shoe department, but I'm just going to say that, it wasn't like a deep philosophical thing. But what I realized was, as I was walking around the shoe department, I do like a quick walk around to see if there's anything I want to try on. And 9 times out of 10, there isn't. And so, I'm a little bit disappointed, but I'm not devastated. And I sort of say to myself, well, good, that's going to save some time and going to save some money. And then the same day that I had the Nordstrom experience, I was talking to my friend Dawn, who'd gone out on Black Friday. He collects vinyl records, and he came up empty. He couldn't find any Motown or gospel. So, and I said, well, how do you feel about that? He goes, well, I'm disappointed, but I didn't spend any money. I'm not devastated. And then I encountered my daughter's goddaughter, who is a teenager, and she and her friends had gone to 3 thrift shops on Black Friday looking for bargains. And they came up empty also. And again, they were disappointed, but there was no devastation. And I thought, if only I can think of networking in the same way, that basically when I'm networking, I'm shopping for connections. And so that's how I have started to reframe this, that now I'm a connection shopper. And if I reach out and I get a response, great. If I find that pair of shoes I want to try on, that's terrific. But if I don't, I'm not going to take it personally. The store buyers and the internet, they're not, personally rejecting me. And I think the same is really true of people we try and network with. We're all bombarded with that. And so you can't expect everything to be a winner. So what I'm going to invite all of you to do as you listen to Paul is think about what works for you in terms of reframing networking. If you're on the 2, 3, or 4 scale. And I now think of myself as a connection shopper. So again, at the end of this, I'd like you to think about, how do you think about networking that makes it something that could be enjoyable for you? So having said all of that, Paul, I'm finally getting to you. And, we know that the mindset that we have when we're networking is crucial. So that's my first question for you. What is your mindset when it comes to networking? Just tell us. And one other thing, we're going to do questions at the end. So we're going to talk to Paul for about 35 minutes, and then we'll have about at least 15 minutes at the end for questions. So as we do this, put your questions in the chat. And as Miriam suggested, put the word question on there, and then we'll look at all of those at the end and, query Paul on that. So Paul, take it away.
Okay, I view networking as something exciting. When I network or even think about networking and being out and about with people, the first thing that comes to mind is the passion. It gets my juices flowing. I look forward to it. I search for something new people, new topics, something different. In addition, networking to me is about putting a puzzle together. Each opportunity to network and be around new people is a way of figuring out an answer to something that I'd always had a question about. It's very similar to taking a puzzle out of a box dumping all the pieces on the table and trying to figure out how to get to the end point of having all the pieces of the puzzle together in a nice picture matching what's on the cover of the box. So that's the way I think about it. I think the starting point is to be passionate about it. View it as something good.
So you also, when I talked to you, you explained kind of your Michael Jordan approach also to networking. So tell us a little bit about how that fits.
Okay, having played sports my whole life, I have an athlete's mindset. And my view is to celebrate the successes and throw away the times or attempts that are not successes. The example about Michael Jordan, I always think about because in his career, he often took the shot at the end of a game. He missed 80% of them. However, the only thing you hear about is the great shots he made and how he was a hero and the star at the end of the game. That's the way I view networking, is to keep on going, take that last shot, make an attempt, and kind of discard those times where it's not a complete success, but also those times when it's not a complete success, I always look to learn or get something out of it. Because if I approach somebody and they're not responsive, there's always somebody else behind them. So I keep on moving.
Okay, great. Something else that you mentioned to me was that everyone has networks that, and so leveraging those networks is really, very key. Can you give us some examples of how you've used your network to reach the people that you want to reach? Like if there's a particular person, let's say, that you want to reach. You told me an interesting story of how you did that. So could you share that with everybody?
Yes. In my most recent office job, I worked at the Australian Embassy in Washington, and often diplomats and other officials wanted to meet with key people who had titles. And many people did not know how to get to the right people, get them to agree to have a meeting. One of the people that the then current ambassador from Australia wanted to meet with was David Rubenstein of the Carlyle Group. And I had heard through the grapevine that several people at the embassy had tried and not gotten a response from David Rubenstein or his staff. Well, I went to Duke, and David Rubenstein was one of the trustees at Duke, and I had run into him a few times at Duke basketball watching parties. So I knew he probably wouldn't recognize me, but I knew him in that context. So what I did was I contacted him directly and mentioned that I was also a Duke basketball fan and needed a favor. And we went back and forth a few times, and he basically said, "What can I help you with?" And I explained it to him. And he agreed to meet with the Australian ambassador because of that Duke basketball connection, or that networking relationship connection.
Great. So you also told me, if I'm remembering this correctly, that you're a lifelong swimmer. And you have used, I think, your swimming background also to get to the right people. Is that,
Yes.
am I remembering that correctly?
Yes, I do master swimming, which is basically competitive swimming for adults. And prior to one of my trips to Australia, I was struggling to get meetings or identify the right people for business reasons. So I decided to contact the master swimming group in Australia. And I said, I need a favor. Can I talk to somebody that knows people? And one thing led to another. I talked to the individual that was the head of master swimming in Australia, and I explained the types of people I wanted to meet, and he connected me to other people, and it kind of went through the grapevine until I had appropriate meetings.
So that sort of goes back to your whole puzzle image, like where am I going to start? Sort of like in a way, if I think of a puzzle, which I did a lot of them over Thanksgiving, the swim team is like the end pieces, and now you're trying to fill in the middle, and you sort of thought about, well, how can I get those middle pieces to fit? So I really like that swim story, because I think we don't tap into our networks, or our other networks, as much as we could. We get to be very siloed, and we think, well, we need something businessy, and we only reach out to business contacts, when in fact we have this whole world of people. In the old days, we used to use, I used to say to people when they were looking for jobs, let's see your address book, pick anybody in there and let's see what's going on with that. Something else that you and I talked about was, and I found this very interesting, is attending events. And we identified 3 types of events, and I wanted to kind of query you on each of those. So one was the big conference, which some of us may start to go to now that the world has opened up a little bit. So in a minute, I want to talk about that one. And then we also, as we get into the holidays a little bit more, we talked about family gatherings. And then we also talked about sort of middle-sized gatherings, which are like holiday parties or even reunions. So I want to start with, what's your approach when you go to a big conference? Everybody listen to this, because I loved it, and it was totally turned my mind around. So explain what you do, Paul.
Okay, similar to the swimming example, where I wanted to end up with meetings in Australia, what I do before I attend a conference is I think about what my end point is. What would success be for me? What do I want to accomplish? And in most cases, it's finding thought leaders who know other people in that field, in that industry, in that discipline, the topic of the conference, whatever the topic might be. And what I'll do in advance is I'll talk to the conference to understand what it's about, try to identify key people to meet. The other thing is I'll go through the agenda, and I will focus on the key speakers, because those are the people that probably know the most on the topic, but most importantly, they have the greatest reach to other people. So those are the people I want to meet. And in my mind, I narrow it down very quickly. If the conference of, for example, 5,000 people, they're probably, success for me would be meeting 5 or 10 key people that I identify in advance. And I view it again as a puzzle or a game.
So also talk a little bit about, I was going to ask you about your 30-second rule.
Okay. In general, I live by the 30-second elevator pitch. When I go to a big conference, I know in advance, it's kind of like a clock in my head, is to limit the amount of time I talk to anybody, for 2 reasons. One is I only have so much time at the conference in a given day. 2, people's attention span is very short. And my goal in talking buddy is to get them to agree to talk to me again. Once they say yes and change information, I'm done and I move on. So sometimes it could be 10 seconds or less.
And how about if there's somebody you already know? What do you do there?
If I already know somebody, I'll acknowledge them, but I'll say very nicely to them, I'm here to meet new people. Let's catch up some other time. Because if you already know somebody, it's self-defeating to spend the talk to them at a conference where you could be meeting other people.
Great. Good.
Uh,
So we have the big conference, and here, your agenda is you want to meet those speakers, and then in 30 seconds or less, you want to meet some other people, and your whole goal is to set up the possibility of talking, get their okay for you to reach out to them after the conference. It's not to have the conversation at the conference, it's to tee it up for the future, right? That's the goal.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
the way I accomplish that is speakers will either be in a small room, a breakout room, or they might be in a big auditorium. I will try to catch the speakers either right before the session starts or right afterwards. And again, I limit the amount of time I talk to them. Often, many of us have experienced going to a big conference, and as soon as the session is over, there's a big line in front of the speaker, and somebody tries to monopolize the speaker's time. What I try to do is go off to the side. As soon as the speaker comes up for a breath, I walk over to them very quickly and say, I'm so-and-so, I liked your speech, this is why we ought to talk again. They, more often than not, they'll give me their card or whatever, and I will then follow up with them very quickly, and they'll agree to talk with me again. But the key is grab them on the side and limit the amount of time that you take to talk to them. They appreciate that.
Great. So you sit on the side is your technique, near the front.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I will catch them as they're walking onto the stage, as they're coming off the stage. And sometimes I might even catch somebody who turns out to be a speaker in the hallway. At a big conference, the badges for speakers are different than other attendees. They have a different color, they might have ribbons on them, something like that. That's what I look for. Those are the people that matter. Other people matter, but not so much.
All right,
And
cool. I
just
like that, speaker hunting. So the big conference, that could be very large. Let's go to the other end of the continuum and talk about, what do you do at a family gathering where you tend to know everybody? Talk to us a little bit about that, because I think I found it interesting anyway.
yeah, I think about two things. The first thing is to get myself comfortable with telling relatives that I'm looking for something from a business perspective, or I'm looking for a job. And that's usually outside of the normal conversations that occur at a family event. The second thing I do is try to find that old funny uncle that most people just joke around with. And the reason is, those types of people, they know two things. One is they have wisdom from their own experience. What works, what doesn't work in business, and that applies to jobs. The second thing is they know who in the family knows what. So if I want to meet somebody who knows a certain topic or might know other, I'll go to funny and say, who here knows this? And I've actually had success doing that, where I've been told, hey, this second or third cousin, you may not have ever spoken to them, but they're in the field you want to learn about.
So that's the crazy old uncle technique, which I thought was really kind of fun. And it gives, sometimes those relatives that it can be a little annoying, it gives them a whole new function, right? At these sort of gatherings. So great. So now let's go to the kind of middle-sized thing. You know, we've got the three beers here, and so this is a little bit of the Goldilocks thing. And this is the medium-sized gathering. When you and I spoke, we talked about like an alumni reunion, but we've also talked about that this time of year, a lot of us tend to go to holiday parties. And so talk a little bit about what your approach is, Paul, at a holiday party.
I
reunion.
find that I find a holiday party is actually the best time to network. Many people avoid networking over the holidays. The reason a holiday party is a great time to network is that people have their guards down, they're generally more open. And the other thing is, after a few drinks, they probably help you in ways they otherwise wouldn't at other times of the year. And at a holiday party, I find that I have to be quicker on my feet than at other times because people's attention span is shorter. They don't want to get into details. Therefore, what I actually do in advance of a holiday party is with other networking events, but especially in advance of a holiday party, practice my elevator either in front of a mirror or with some friends to make sure it captures somebody's attention and is less than 30 seconds. And at a holiday party, usually.
What I was going to say is when you and I talked, you also, this was a little bit different. You said that one of the things you do at a holiday party is that you find yourself listening more than talking. So explain to us a little bit about why that approach seems to work in this particular context.
At a holiday party or more of a relaxed environment, my experience is that I need to listen more before I talk because I want to find out or figure out what I have in common with somebody I want to talk to. It could be sports, it could be the opera, it could be building a house. It doesn't matter. Once I find that topic in common, I use that to approach somebody to get them to talk to me a second time. I specifically do not talk about business because that will turn off people very quickly. I find that synergy or that point of empathy so we could talk again.
So, and talk again, even at the party. So you might find out what you have in common, then you go off, get your, another drink, or you get an appetizer, and then it sounds like maybe you come around a second time to some of those people to build a stronger bridge. Is that some of the approach?
A little bit, because it's fewer people, I could talk to people a second time. What my experience is, if a holiday party is, say, 20 to 30 people, within a couple hours, I've gotten to know something about very quickly, something about everybody there. And then I try to figure out, of those 20 or 30 people, who do I really want to follow up with? And I usually narrow it down to 4 or 5 people that matter. And success for me would be, out of those 4 or 5, if 2 or 3 agree to meet with me at a later time, that's success.
Good. There's actually interesting research that says when we go to an event and we talk to someone for a minute, or so, or 30 seconds in your case, then we go away and we encounter them again. The second time we actually encounter them, it's as if we know them, and then it sort of builds that bridge. So,
Yes.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
I just want to explore one other thing before we get to the questions, and that is, you're very big on utilizing finding something in common with people. As you know, as like you mentioned earlier, you approach networking with passion. Also, it sounds like that's a little bit of your special sauce, is finding something in common. So talk to us a little bit about how that works for you.
The way it works is I find to get people's attention, it needs to include something that they have an interest in. And people who have similar interests or backgrounds tend to help each other. I gave the example of being a Duke alumnus, the example of being a swimmer. Another example I have is after Katrina hit the Gulf Coast a number of years ago, I was going to take a group of Australian companies down there. The only thing I knew about New Orleans was Bourbon Street. So I had to find thought leaders, people who knew other people in New Orleans. I was talking to the rabbi of my temple one day. He knew a rabbi in New Orleans. And it turns out that rabbi kind of knew everybody, and he knew one of the minority owners of the New Orleans Saints, who of course knew a ton of people. So one thing led to another just by talking to somebody I had something in common with, and they were willing to help me because we shared a common interest.
I love it. I just love hearing how you kind of weave your way to the people you want to get to. So now, Paul, let's look at some of these questions that people have posed. So Miriam, I believe you have been monitoring. So let's see Miriam front and center here, Kendra. And there we go. There's our friend Miriam. And just go ahead, Miriam, you take it on. Pose the ones that look, that look good. Let's do as much as we can in the time we have left. Go for it.
Sure. Okay. What tips do you have for introverts who need to network? It's a little harder sometimes. It feels like a little natural.
Well, in some ways it's harder, but in some ways it's the same. If you're an introvert, one of the things I would suggest is, if you're at a networking event, if you see somebody else at the event that also appears to be an introvert, that gives you something in common to talk to them about. For example, you might walk over to them and say, I'm having a tough time, keeping up with the people here. Other people seem to be networking better than me. That starts a conversation.
Okay, so
try to play with your strengths.
Introverts tend to be good listeners also, so it makes it easier to find what you have in common. But I love how your mind works. You're always going for that. What do we have in common as the major building block? It's just, that's where you go. Fascinating. Okay, Miriam, what's next?
Okay, so you go to a big party or a conference, you have 20 or 30 conversations. How do you remember who you spoke with and keep track of all that?
In addition to having a bit of a tape in my head, what I do is, I'm still a little bit old-fashioned. I get business cards. On every business card, I'll write 2 to 5 words that will trigger a memory about what did I talk to that person about. It could be a whole variety of topics. The next thing I do is I take those business cards and I'll use 3 pockets. One pocket is for cards of people that don't matter. One pocket is for cards of people who matter a little bit. And one pocket is for cards of people who matter the most. The pocket that has the fewest cards at the end of the day is the people that matter the most.
And on the business card thing, what I find is there's a lot of people that don't necessarily have them, and at a social event they might not have them, but I have them. So what I do is I will write their email address on the back of the card that I keep, but then I can give them my card also. So it's I agree with you, but I love the 3-pocket approach. There's so many fun things that you do, Paul, that are just they're great.
Yeah. The other thing is sometimes even at a big conference where you are going around very, very fast, I'll stop and take a breath and I'll have a notebook and I'll write notes to myself. Now, I am the only person that would understand those notes. They will make no sense to anybody else.
In case you lose the notebook. Yes. All right.
So
Ellie, I just want to say, Ellie, I'm knowing Paul, I don't think he ever really categorizes someone as not mattering at all. I just think they're not, if you triage the group, that it's not the group at that point that matters the most for what he needs at that moment. Would that be correct, Paul?
Yes.
Okay, good.
So Paul, you talked about using your swimming connections. You talked about using your alma mater connections. Where else can people find common interests? What else do you recommend for people who maybe don't do a sport?
I'll give examples. Any hobbies. It could be a book club. It could be going to the opera. It could be, if you're a foodie, going to restaurants. If you like cooking, you might cook with people and take cooking classes, and you may never have considered the fact that you have something in common or can help each other in ways that have nothing to do with cooking. You might ask them about their partner or spouse, their kids, where they've lived, what they currently do. And something in there is going to trigger some you to say, I want to know more about that.
My best job came from a connection at my book club from somebody that I didn't really know, but I just told, my motto when you're a career coach is you want to tell everybody that you're looking for a job. But anyway, so great point. And it sounds like fun to take cooking lessons also.
Yeah. The other thing I would say about that is whether it's in your community or let's say extended community, there tend to be people who are know-it-alls. They're not necessarily the people with the fancy titles. It could be your dry cleaner, your dentist, your doctor. It could be a barista at a Starbucks. I've made business connections through a barista at a Starbucks because they know everybody who walks in there.
So
Paul,
to Ellie's point in the chat, you never know basically who matters at the moment and who doesn't. So good.
So and it makes sense to actually, if you take a cooking class or take an adult ed class or watch some webinars, you also have something else you can talk about yourself. So especially if you're job hunting, if people say, what are you doing? You can say, I'm job hunting. In the meantime, I'm also taking this cooking class, right? And it sounds like you're still an active person and still actively involved in things, right?
Yes.
So, yeah.
So Miriam, I just want to make a point that Angela has drawn to our attention, and I think people may know about this, but she is talking about the strength of weak ties, and there is actually research that was done, I think around 1976. By somebody who was living in Newton at the time. He's a sociologist now based at Stanford, named Mark Granovetter. And his research was, he asked people how it was they got their jobs. And it turns out it was not from people in their close network. It was from acquaintances and people that they barely knew. And if we step back and think about why that's the case, it's because the people in our network know the same people we do. They have a lot of the same connections. It's the people who are outside of that unit that can really stretch us beyond it. And I think there's data from the guy who, one of the co-founders of LinkedIn, that I think 2 degrees of separation, connects you with like 3 million people. I'm probably exaggerating that, but I have a slide to that effect somewhere. So really, this whole thing about the strength of weak ties is a headline for today, in addition to the whole idea of finding what you have in common with some of those weak ties. Miriam, back to
Yeah,
you.
so Paul, okay, you've done your networking, you have your cards, you have the different pockets. What do you do after that? And how do you keep those networks alive? Let's say a couple of years later, what do you do in the meantime?
Okay, I think there are 2 things. My general rule of thumb is I have 24 hours to follow up with anybody I meet with the first time. Beyond 24 hours, I might as well move on, because people's attention span is short, and you're looking for mind share. So if you don't follow up within 24 hours, somebody else has. And following up could be a phone call, an email, or if they live close by, just meeting them for coffee. Keeping them going, I do it in 2 ways. One is a general rule of thumb. People that matter, I have to touch them 4 times a year. It doesn't matter how. It could be talking about sports, talking about food, talking about travel. Usually that touch has nothing to do with business. It's just, I'm here, remember me, but there's another part to it. To keep it going, keep on offering things to do to help the other person. How can I help you? What do you need? And if I'm not the person that can solve that need or help them, I will often find somebody who can. That's the other side of networking. So I like to be known as somebody who can make a connection for somebody else.
Great.
And I do that on a regular basis.
I have a little background noise here, sorry, but is there an expiration date? Like you haven't heard back from someone, you connected with them, and maybe initially you did hear back. Is there a point at which you kind of put them in the okay, not anymore, or do you continue to pursue them if you feel that they would be useful for your goals?
I continue to pursue them if I feel it would be mutually beneficial, and that's the key. It has to be mutual. And more often than not, I find the reason for a lack of response, something personal came up, something attracted their attention for a while, and that's especially true since COVID started.
And Paul, this sounds like this could be like 2 full-time jobs, just following up with all these people. So how do you manage this time-wise?
Well, I find that networking and following up with people is it's part of my makeup. I do it naturally. In a given week, I will probably follow up in some way with 30 to 40 different, some having to do with business, some just most of them have general interest, with the idea that we both believe it's mutually beneficial to stay in touch, because one, we get together, we have great conversations, and 2, maybe sometime down the road we can help each other.
Great.
So
We've
I surround myself.
Wow. So we have time for other questions if anybody else has anything on their minds. I bet something that's on people's minds, Paul, is can they network with you? So are you on LinkedIn? How can people get in
Yes.
touch with you?
I'm on LinkedIn. Miriam will share my email address. If anybody wants to take some time to talk, to get to know each other, I'd be glad to do that.
So do
Great.
we want to put your email address? I guess we can put it in the follow-up, but we could also put it in the chat right now. Do you want to put that in there for everyone?
Paul, you want to
If
give
you
us your
give it to
email
me,
address?
I can write it. What is it? It's Paul. What's your email?
It's thepaladler@gmail.com.
Say it again.
The word THE, then my name, pauladler@gmail.com.
Paul, do you have a favorite networking story? Can you give us a specific example? You gave us a bunch of examples, but something that worked for you?
Um, that worked for me personally. What, in addition to doing my consulting business, I've tried to keep myself busy with other things, mainly surrounding people. And a few months ago, I started substitute teaching. And I've stuck with elementary school because I find the vibe is the best. And it turns out that I guess it was in a third or fourth grade class, as the kids were asking me about my background, what do I do, where have I lived, and all that type of stuff. It turns out that this particular boy's father is in a business area similar to mine. And we met and we were able to exchange leads and networking or relationship potential with each other. And that came to a 9-year-old.
And how did you find out you had that in common with him?
Well, as the kids were asking me questions about me, I mentioned, where I've lived and that I'm in global business, what I do in global business. And one of the boys said, hey, my father does something like that too.
Great.
And he put me in touch with his father.
So how do you network across generations? Here you're talking about networking with a young 9-year-old, but if there's someone who's, let's say, in their 20s or 30s that you think might be able to help you get what you need, is there anything you would do differently?
Well, what I find is, and I've just learned this through trial and error, as a baby boomer, as I mentioned earlier, networking or relationships is kind of part of our makeup. We didn't grow up with technology. We had to solve things and figure things out through relationships. And when I need something that I think somebody much younger could help me with, I offer to help them. And what it turns out to be more often than not that I can help them with is connecting with people. And that's what I do for them. And then they might help me. For example, one of the things I started doing was being a guest lecturer at local business schools. The topic was global business. Well, I think it was at a Starbucks. I ran into a local university student who turned out they were taking a course on global business. They were asking me some questions about my background because they want to get into global business. And I said, hey, that sounds interesting. Can you put me in touch with your professor? Because I'd like to be a guest lecturer. And she said, I think my classmates would love that. So she put me in touch with that professor.
Cool.
Wow, so you just need to talk to everybody.
That's it. Yeah.
Did you
and
ever have a
offer
sit-
things, you know, like
To me, it's kind of England.
yeah.
Did you ever have a situation that didn't turn out the way you wanted to, a networking situation? And if so, how did you handle that? Like maybe someone wasn't receptive or any issues like that?
Well, I thought about that. Because that was one of the questions. And I had two recent incidents. I always try to turn something into a success or something that feels good at the end of the day. I went to two networking events where at each networking events, I wasn't successful in making that connection where there'd be a mutual interest and we would stay in touch. One was a book signing for a guy who wrote a book on the history of renewable energy, and I'd been involved with renewable energy, so I wanted to go there to see who I could connect with. Well, walking into the building, I met several people, I think 3 or 4 people that weren't going to that event. It was a big office building. And each of them I have since followed up with, and we're gonna help each other out. And then the same thing happened after that networking event. I met some people on the metro going home. So I'm always looking for that. The second situation was I mentor startups, and this is the cross-generational piece. Startups that are run by young people, they come up with stuff we would never think about. And I went to, let's say, a party event where a lot of them were there. I wasn't able to make any, let's say, additional connections for follow-up. But afterwards, I was walking from that building to my car, and I met somebody where we had some mutual interests and we could help each other out, and I followed up. So when you ask about situations where it kind of didn't work, I'm always looking to make it work.
So how do you start these conversations with the people in the building or in the parking lot? What do you just say to them?
I generally start with something I notice about them. In the case of one of the women running into this issue, she seemed to be late for a meeting, running into the building where I went to the book. So I started talking to her about, I've been there, I've been late for a meeting, I hope you're on time, everything will be okay and stuff like that. And she appreciated that, and she stopped to talk with me.
That's a great story. Okay, well,
So Miriam, one thing I just kind of like to end with is if we're okay with that, I think we've answered most of the questions, right? Is just to kind of get a sense of what was the most valuable for you, from this session. If people want to put that in the chat, it's kind of a good way to remind us of some of these gems that Paul has given us. And I'm just curious what was useful, what was helpful, if you were able to, for example, reframe how you think about networking, or some tip you're going to take away. I have a couple of things I'm going to do this afternoon based on what Paul said to do. So people, just feel free to throw that into the chat. Let's see what we have.
And we'd also like to hear, relate to that, what's the next action you'll take? Like Amy said, you're going to be doing something different. If there's something that you got motivated to do that you're going to put on your to-do list, if not today, then maybe in the next week or so. Love to hear that. So we have someone has an objective now to know what you're looking for. Okay. And I know I'm going to try to reconnect with some people I haven't been in touch with for a while and say hello. 4 times a year. That's a really good target to think about it. Yes. Yeah, the common ground. That's so important. That is how relationships are built, by how people feel they have something in common. I've done the research on that. The strength of weak ties. So it's not necessarily the people you know, but it's the people they know or the people a few steps away from you. So we've gotten a lot of really interesting topics. So I want to thank you both. Thank you so much, Paul, for sharing your experience and your wisdom. Thank you so much, Amy, for your expert questions and sharing also your perspective. I want to thank Kendra Mrozik, who is our technology expert, who helps make all these webinars happen. And of course, I want to thank all of you for attending and participating, because you also make these happen. So as noted earlier, this session has been recorded. We will send you the recording if you want to see it again, if you want to share it with other people. There's so many good tips in there. And we'll
Can they
include some
also,
information.
Miriam, save
Yes.
the chat?
Yes, we'll save the chat. And we will include Paul's email again. So if you didn't catch it, you'll be able to network with him and email with him. We encourage you to look at our website, because we'll have more speakers that you can network with coming up. We have a lot of programs. We have a lot of references. Somebody's asking how to watch this again. We will send you the link. It'll be a link and you'll get it within the week or so. So watch your email. And it'll also be eventually posted on our website as well. We do want to encourage you to join us. We want to encourage you to sign up for our webinar. It's all free. And we have a couple of programs coming up in December related to job hunting.